So here we go. All right, so I like to call this a consciousness audit. Okay, so, as you've discussed, particularly in relation to your neck, you'd already seen a chiropractor and a physiotherapist, and they provided some level of minor amelioration, but nowhere near to your satisfaction. And having had some success in the past with using me, you decided to give me a call again. So thank you. So this is basically a summary on this first slide here of what took place. So we've got this, the way I see it, we've got this past unresolved stress or trauma episode, possibly setting the ground for this to take place some years down the track. So let's just say your body responded to the situation or the episode from a fight-flight point of view, which is effectively a survival mechanism. Okay, and then you've got the current stress or trauma process that you're dealing with right now, and I'll discuss that again shortly. There's a structural relationship here, as in how the neck pain eventually came to be as a result of certain muscles or parts of your TMJ and neck facilitating the pain, etc. And I'll go into again what I came up with through my remote investigation, and then what we talked about to make sense of that in the one-to-one consult, and then what we did to basically create a healing intervention. All right, so the unresolved stress or trauma episode, right? So in my remote investigation, I discovered there was something around peace that your body was seeking, and at that stage I didn't really know what that was all about. However, as you went on to express to me over the phone, that when I suggested to you that it had something to do with South Africa and associated with a loved one, that you started to recall let's just call it a tragedy or an incident that took place when you were on a wildlife safari in South Africa. So, as I mentioned here, there was 3 vehicles in your convoy. One of them actually toppled over an embankment, injuring one of the family members seriously, and you were lucky, I guess, because you weren't in that vehicle. So you don't, as far as you were concerned, when I asked you, you didn't feel that you had any trauma or any unresolved emotional feelings towards that event, and that was it as far as you were concerned. However, when I did probe you, we were able to elaborate on that situation with regards to the possible dangers that were present. So even though you weren't part of the actual incident itself, perhaps you had a response to the danger that was possibly present due to, it being nightfall and you being in a wildlife park, and your guides are stressing the fact that you needed to be back in the car, etc. So maybe that's how you integrated this particular trauma. Current issues, of course, as you mentioned in our phone conversation, were over the last year or so, your children moving out of home. So now, as we like to say, as parents, you become empty nesters and everything that involves in terms of particularly all the unknowns. All right. This is the part, I guess, that you're most interested in is regards to the relationship, right? So we discovered through investigation today that your sternocleidomastoid was involved, right? So being these muscles here. So they actually were in what I would call a hypertonic type state, or tight, or somehow traumatized or compromised or disturbed, however you want to use that or describe that, which basically means that somehow they haven't returned to normal function following the stress or trauma that you witnessed so many years ago in South Africa. So what were we going to do about it? All right, so we suggested, and we did this over the WhatsApp so you could see me, that these muscles actually work partly during rotation. Okay, so we want to sort of turn our head slightly like that in one direction, take our head back like that, and then allow our hand to hold this position here. Now what we're trying to do is take our head back in this direction, but not actually move as we breathe out. Okay, so this is called, well, I like to call it a hypertonic stretch, or sometimes I like to call it a P&F stretch. So we're going to basically hold our head back like this and push against it gently. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to push against it as we breathe out gently for about 8 seconds. And then we take our head back further, and then we hold that again. Okay, and then we take it back further again, and then we just go. Try to turn and flex our head back into this neutral position towards the camera, so to speak. All right, so after we've done that on one side, we can turn to the other side. So tip your head back slightly, turn it slightly in one direction, and then tip it over there, and then apply a resistance force with your hand and try and bring your head back to neutral. So that involves turning and flexing. But of course, we're not moving. Okay, now as you mentioned, when you did that exercise, you actually noticed the pain in the back there, right where you actually experience the pain when you're turning your head. So we know we're sort of on the right track. Okay, so we'll just get you to do that maybe once or twice a day. Just do it 3 reps on each side, 8 seconds as you breathe out, very gently, until you think you don't need to do that anymore. The other thing we discovered was that it was possible you had a fight-flight response, in other words, a survival response to the incident. And even though that you may not have comprehended it that way at the time, some part of you did. Okay, I'm not going to get too deeply into that part of your consciousness that did okay, but let's just accept that there's a possibility. So what likely happens is it most commonly gets involved with this right jaw, okay, or the right TMJ. Now the way the muscles run here are usually in like a vertical fashion. So what we do is we want to force them into relaxation. So what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze them like this together. Okay, just up and down this area of your face, and we're just squeezing in a vertical direction there. Okay, then we're going to come up here to the lateral side of your head, or the parietal area, and we're going to squeeze the muscles together here as well, in that same direction as we were doing on our face. Right. Then we're going to come over to this left side here. We're going to slide our finger back towards where we feel this indentation, where our upper and lower jaw comes together. In other words, our maxilla and mandible. Open up, we stick our finger in, and then we just give it a good massage. And that's actually going to be quite sore. Okay, but we only just want to do that for 3, 4, 5 seconds, and that's enough. And then we want to repeat the same process on the left side. So again, I want to squeeze here. Okay, and then we squeeze up here on this parietal area on the left side, and then we move over to this right side. We open our mouth, take our finger back, and we just stick it in there and rub really hard, like we're trying to give the muscles a massage in there. Okay, now I suspect that what we've done already may be enough, but you may need to do that maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more times over the next few days. And you know, as you're doing that, you're actually doing that to help you release. You're basically telling the body that it's okay to release any stress or trauma associated with that incident you experienced in South Africa. Okay, so you've got the PNF or hypertonic stretch for the sternocleidomastoid, and then you also got the TMJ intervention. All right, so in my remote investigation, as I sort of briefly mentioned earlier, before I knew anything about the specifics of the incident, I knew it had something to do with peace and something to do with South Africa, right? So and something to do with a loved one and or a relative. That was as specific as I got. Okay, so your body, in terms of that part of you that's aware on another level beyond your consciousness, was effectively seeking peace. In other words, trying to resolve whatever it was that happened, or your perception to what happened in South Africa. Okay, so specifically, it was, I choose a serene way of life, and I send thoughts of peace to troubled parts of the world. So that really is just being super specific around the relationship to the location of the trauma. Okay, so that's where it actually took place. So it was necessary just to bring that forward to help you create the release or the healing. All right, and the second part was that there was something associated with an attachment to a possession, be it a point of view or even your identity. In other words, the relationship or the contrast to being a custodian versus ownership. Okay, so for example, with possessions, be it a house, car, or any material possession, our law would suggest that once we pay money and get a receipt, that we actually own it, but we really only use it until such a time it breaks down, or we replace it, or in fact it gets taken away, or someone steals it. All right, so we're just in possession of it. Now, that can also relate to a point of view. In other words, they always change as well, or it can actually relate to our identity. Okay, so our identity, we're not going to go into much great depth here, but effectively we can somehow, depending on things or people or places in our life that we ascribe a lot of value, sometimes those values can form part of our identity with ourselves. Okay, and when that part of our identity or that thing or that relationship or that person is gone, sometimes it reflects upon how we see ourselves. Right, and then that needs to be resolved. So this is basically what we did. I already just previously went through the structural corrections there for the hypotonics or PNF stretches for the sternocleidomastoid, and the facial release for the TMJ. However, we then went on to talk about forgiveness. So when we discussed the association, well, what was actually going on for you in the present in relation to becoming an empty nester, we discovered that your relationship with your child, of course, was strongly associated with your identity, and now that child's gone, part of your identity has actually collapsed. So part of the belief situation that you'd bestowed upon her was that she was unable to take care of herself out there on her own and stay safe, although you could see the ridiculousness of it, intellectually speaking, there's still a part of you that took that on board as being a real issue. Now, the irony is that how you see them or that person outside of you more or less relates to you, how you see yourself. So you'll see here the way we did the forgiveness, even though in this slide I've included judging your child's ability to take care of herself in every way. We turn that around, like in contrast or the mirror, so to speak, and we associate that with us. Okay, so it's I forgive myself for judging my ability to live and thrive on my own on any level, or I forgive myself for judging my ability to take care of myself on all levels, physically, mentally, and emotionally. All right, so as we do that, as I mentioned, this is all about being for giving up this idea that you can't take care of yourself, okay? And your ability to forget, in other words, before getting the new state that we discussed as well. If you want to refer to a further explanation that on the blog page of my website, I've got a presentation around forgiving and forgetting, so that will just extrapolate on that even more. Right, so lastly, in summary, we've got, this, perhaps they weren't all connected, but they're all relating to each other in some way, shape or form. So we just don't know whether you would have experienced this neck pain as a result of what's going on right now with your child, or not. However, we've got the trauma, okay, the wildlife park incident, and as a result, we've got a survival response that's basically locked your response to that into the jaw. All right. Now, as you mentioned, the correlation that we have made here between the past incident and this incident is that you were in the front and all your nieces were in the back, where you were unable to really comfort them during this time. So, in fact, maybe you felt helpless to a degree. And perhaps you judge yourself for that. And that's why that forgiveness is so important. However, coming forward to now, that inability to really have any control over your daughter's ability to allow her to be safe, obviously also relates to control and being or having any level of direct intervention. So perhaps it all rests on you and how that relates to you, and taking care of your beliefs about your ability to survive on your own, so to speak. So initially we want to bring your body's asking to bring some level of peace to this situation. As mentioned in those affirmations earlier, this whole thing has led to a position in terms of, like a loss of your identity based on how much you value and love your daughter and how she is part of your identity up to this point. And as a result, becoming an empty nester has really challenged that idea or challenged that part of your identity, which requires some reintegration, so to speak. And we do that, or we attempt to do that through the forgiveness, right? So that's the learning part. So that all revolves around a big circle and keeps feeding into itself. And until we actually get the learning, we don't get the completion. All right. So together with the exercises and the forgiveness exercise and the reintegration or resolution of everything we've discussed here, we should see change. All right, so as I mentioned, I'll be in touch with you shortly to check in and see how things are going. Until then, good luck with everything, and I'll talk to you soon.